Love the offices. Obviously known you for a long time. I think pretty much, 6 months into starting Avona, we had the first chat. Worked out we were kind of on a very similar mission. Since starting Avona, there's been lots and lots and lots of learns. And I think as I reflect, starting a company which lots of people around me said to not do, so I didn't listen to that advice. Since actually running the business, having the right advice has been absolutely imperative. And there's been a few times in the company where it's got a bit dicey. You know, we haven't had any investment yet. And we, you know, in those times, turning to the right advisors, getting people to really push back on what we wanted to do, has been so important. And working out how you know, what skill set should you have internally, what should be external, how do you monitor your cash flow, so on and so forth. So I feel like at this point now, almost 7 years in, to run this company specifically around talent for space, I think there's an opportunity to share a lot of the messages about the sort of skill sets that you should have internally versus externally, and the sort of advice that you can get to help your company. It's very easy to just speak to people that are going to say to you what they think that you want to hear. And I think there's an opportunity to lower the failure rate of small businesses. That's quite scary. But I genuinely think with the right access to the right advisory and to the right opinions and the right structure, we can lower that failure rate. There's nothing out there that somebody else hasn't messed up before that can prevent you from making the same mistake. But access to those people is the difficult part. So that's kind of my mission now, from a talent perspective, to try to lower the amount of companies that fail. You know, I run a company myself, have a family. The thought of it failing is terrifying. You know, I just can't think of anything worse. So I just want to help others to stop that situation ever happening.
Yeah, the best companies, the best teams are able to surround themselves with, you know, really great talent, and I agree. I think that's critical to their success, and you know, helps them go farther, faster. So a really worthy mission.
Definitely, yeah, and I think, you know, my angle from a talent perspective, your angle from a VC perspective is going to be very interesting. I'm keen to understand, you know, what are the common mistakes that you see happen, and then I can talk about it from a talent perspective, and then I think, you know, just sort of running through some of the statistics that are out there in terms of why so many businesses fail, trying to pair those with some of the right skill sets, and then having a discussion about what we think might be considered to be an internal skill set versus an external skill set. I think that might be useful for any of the founders out there or any other management teams who are feeling that pressure. We've all been there. It's hardcore. So hopefully this is worthwhile for that.
Awesome. Should we dig into the failure rates?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, over to you. So I've got the top 6 reasons why VC-backed businesses fail, and this is data from Harvard Business. It's also from Crunchbase and from CB Insight. So, you know, these numbers, are they 100% exact? Probably not, but they're pretty, you know, they are very, very close. So what would you say? You know, there's 6 to choose from. What would you say from your experience are the top reasons why VC-backed businesses fail?
Yeah, so I've had, you know, sort of a longitudinal perspective here at Space Capital for, you know, over 7 years now. So we've, you know, invested in over 50 companies and been able to see them mature at different stages. Some of them are early growth, some of them exited. Before that, I also worked at a fund, Acumen, early stage fund focused on East Africa and South Asia. And they had an established portfolio when I joined of, you know, probably about 40 companies and a long history of data. So I actually had the opportunity to like go in and look at all of those fact patterns and try to dissect them and try to detect, you know, sort of failure rates. And I don't think that there's anything like shocking here. I think it's pretty straightforward. You know, my partner Tom, I think, you know, says it best. You know, it's all about, you know, management team, and particularly at early stage, like, you know, a very heavy amount of the criteria we're evaluating is the people, how they know each other, what they've previously done, how they come and end up working together, and who else they're able to attract to surround themselves to really sort of reinforce their strengths, but augment, their gaps. And we actually quantify variables to score companies, particularly in talent, which is hard to like quantifiably rank, but we've done that. And 50% of the variables that we analyze are all based on team. So so that then sort of, I think, translates to a question of where do companies end up failing? Well, I think ultimately the consequence of a company not sort of meeting, its product market fit or its outcome, successful outcome, is largely due to the people and the decisions that they made along the way, right?
Yeah.
So team has to be the first one for me, sort of clear out of the gate. I would say second to that is sort of a function of how those teams made decisions, which is around product market fit. And you hear this often. I think there's a couple dimensions to that. One, which is around what is the product that you built? Did you build that in a silo? Or did you actually go out and listen to the market and build something that the market wants? And that's sort of this idea of pivoting and listening and building iterative, particularly in space tech. You can find some brilliant engineers that think that they've solved the problem and they build solutions in a vacuum. So you get it out to market, and it can be really hard to generate demand or stimulate demand, particularly in complex engineering, type sales, where people don't necessarily understand or see only a marginal benefit to what you're selling. And then on the other side of that, the market just may not exist. It may be small, it may be nascent, it may take longer to develop. What's happening within the lunar economy right now is a very interesting example. We've made several investments there.
Yeah.
That market is anchored, by NASA and the Artemis Accords and what we're doing there. We believe and we see indication that there's commercial interest all around that from big Fortune 500 companies to other governments, but that market may take longer to materialize than what we anticipate, right? And so those factors that can be a little bit outside of the control of a founder and a team, but you would expect that team to sort of read the market signals and pivot accordingly, right, to find the best application and use and market for their capabilities. And so again, that goes back to a team set of decisions and staying a little bit too focused. So those are like the immediate ones off the top of my head. I mean, I would love to hear sort of what some of the data says, and we can unpack, maybe how those fit together.
Yeah, agree with everything that you just said. Just as a side note, it was very interesting, the event that we were both at yesterday, and hearing about the lunar exploration side of it, just completely different perspective. For instance, the fact that the moon surface doesn't necessarily need to be excavated. Very interesting. Never knew that. Makes complete sense. So I think there's all these different areas that, again, it's what you just said. The product market fit, I have here as the number one reason why the companies fail. So 35%. And it's interesting because when you apply that to lunar, it's like, okay, well, no one's really worked out the market yet. But then you look at the people that are leading those companies, and these are impressive people. They understand it. So I think, the product market fit, like you said, I think it's very important when we say these to not look at them so literally, but to just consider them as areas to really focus on, then try to get advice and expertise and just learn from others.
There often isn't a single point of failure.
No,
right?
That's very true.
That's the hard thing about these like academic studies. It's a series of decisions and a series of sort of complications, right?
It is, yeah. But I think from these 6 things, if people are able to sit back and say, okay, we have these under control either internally, and we have each person has a mentor or an advisor to help them, or it's stuff that we've gone through and we've market tested, then great. But so many people don't. We didn't. So I'd imagine that others didn't. We had to learn this the hard way. So number one is product market fit at 35%. A few others that you touched on. So weak leadership and team issues is number 3, and that's at 18%. That's obviously a very important part of it. I think potentially something that happens a bit further into scale. Hiring the wrong people, losing the way, trying to move away from what the business was originally set out looking to do. And of course, iterations of the business happen on like a daily basis.
Are you like turning your head left and right as you're talking?
I don't think so.
No, Tom, are you?
I don't think so. No.
Let's try to put it more center.
Is my t-shirt moving, is it?
No, I think when you look down or something, like it fades out.
Okay.
So then it's a lot lighter.
Let's try to put it in between.
Yeah, and Justin,
then
try to
it's-
move yours a little bit to the middle as well. I think this is why a button down is always perfect. It's always perfectly centered.
That's
when
probably
you,
why they do it, yeah.
When you plug it in, so you never really worry about
Yeah.
the face so much.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, let's try that.
And a little bit higher. Let's try that.
Okay. If not, perhaps I can put it on my cap.
Don't.
Okay.
That's actually not a bad idea, is it?
I was like, this is the perfect time to do it while you're doing your countdown.
Okay.
But are we still good? Is that?
Good. I
that's
think
the thing?
everything else is fixable, but I was just trying to make it less fixable.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, got it.
Sorry about
Let's go back to the countdown.
Yeah.
Just to start again, just so that can be smooth. So, okay. So as you referenced, product market fit is number one. That is 35%, according to these statistics, of why a business fails. Like you say, there's lots of different elements to that to unpack. There's lots of different reasons. There's lots of different P's which exist, which people need to look at. So that is what we have as number one. The second one that you kind of touched on was some of the team issues. So management team, yes, but how do you get the rest of the team on board with the vision? That was number three for us at 18%. And another one related to team is scaling too quick. We were guilty of that. I'm sure there's lots of other companies that have been too. And that's 15% of the reasons why. And I think directly related to that is number two, which is burning through cash. Scale too quick, you burn through cash, or you don't have a lid on your cash flow. That's 25%. Now, I would have thought that running out of cash would be ahead of product market fit. So it's interesting that these statistics and what you've noticed both mirror that the product market fit is absolutely imperative. I think there's lots of amazing ideas out there, but it's very, very important for these companies to really sit down and really make sure that does fit, but also taking into consideration, as we just mentioned with the lunar, you still need to go for ideas that haven't been done yet. I was told by every single person to not go after the space industry because it's too niche. So at a certain point, you need to choose your own path. However, understanding how that actually fits the market is key. The other two that we got is the go-to-market. So failing to scale customers. So I guess more from a business development perspective, that's 10%. And then the one that's 7%, which I find interesting, is the competitive pressure. So unable to adapt and move with the market. Something I think that, again, that's a complicated one to unpack because there's a whole multitude of reasons. So there's lots of different reasons there. So I'll just run through them again in terms of the number one reason all the way down. So product market fit, number one. Running out of cash, number two. Weak leadership and team issues, number three. Scaling too quick, number four. The go-to-market is number five, and number six is the inability to adapt to market conditions. So how does that compare with your thoughts?
I mean, all of those seem very reasonable. I would just argue that at each one of those failure points, it is people making decisions about how and where to go and run their business, right? And so, competition is an interesting example, right? Maybe you're not paying close enough attention to who your competitors are, being very ruthless about, what product enhancements you prioritize versus others, and having the right people there that are willing and curious or willing to challenge you, can help augment some of that. On the business model one, I do think it's sort of interesting going back to sort of this comparison that we've been looking at in the lunar economy. companies in that area have been particularly resource constrained. Like venture investors aren't willing to just give them an open check. It's hard to raise money. Over the last, since 2009, $700 million has been invested into equity financing into companies doing lunar-related activities. That's pennies compared to everywhere else in venture. They've had to be very resourceful and potentially using the lunar market to be one part of their business, but then commercializing that into existing established markets, whether it be agriculture, or energy, or mining. And those constraints can help drive innovation with the right team that's very focused on the challenges and sort of solving for those problems. So, that's a good list.
Yeah, what you just mentioned there as well is something that's incredibly important. Is the consideration for the technology to be applicable to multiple markets is absolutely key from what we've seen, especially in the space industry. So again, it's like just kind of learning. I'm not an engineer myself, however, over the last 7 years, been deeply embedded into it and worked with lots of different companies and seen some work out amazingly, some not so much. And again, that application of the technology, which again comes under product market fit, is absolutely crucial. So, and I'm sure that you guys have also seen the same. So, in terms of the next part of this, I spent some time trying to match some of the core skill sets. Now, if you're a seed-funded business, obviously looking to bring in a whole C-suite is not applicable because you would then be a victim of issue number 2 because you would effectively not have enough cash. But in terms of actually matching up the skill sets so that people can get a mental picture in terms of like ultimately who's responsible for what. And then after that, I'd be keen just to look at, okay, between us, what do we think in terms of at which funding stage should you have these skill sets in-house versus external? Because I just want to make it very clear, what this is not about is saying that every hire should be a fractional hire. That's not what this is about whatsoever. This is about saying if you have people internally, bring in people with the right culture that you can work with that are passionate and supplement perhaps they have a bit less experience by a mentor or an advisor, because there's all this knowledge out there. We have to look to tap into it. It's just absolutely imperative. Don't see a lot of these highly experienced people as just, the old guys who don't get it. That's just not the case at all. So, so in terms of number one, the product market fit, which skill sets would you say, from like a C-suite perspective would fit that?
It gets a little complicated when you think about stages because we don't necessarily know like at what point these companies failed. Product market fit, I would likely say, is an early stage, issue, right? Most companies probably raised a seed, Series A, and they just weren't able to really generate sufficient revenue to get to the next stage, right? So they sort of fall off at that point. So I think that then goes to a question of what's the right core founding team. Oftentimes being a solo founder, that's a really tough thing. So we really like to see teams that have, a technical and a business leader.
Yeah.
Often early sales are founder driven.
Yeah.
And so to have somebody who can actually build the technology and somebody who can tell the story to multiple critical stakeholders, including your suppliers, your investors, and your potential customers, are sort of like the bare minimum, I would argue, to, an initial company being successful. You're not at a point at that stage where it makes sense to bring in like a full-time, chief product officer or chief revenue officer, right? Because it's still very iterative and listening to the market. And so, but the existing founding team may not have deep experience in those areas. Yeah. So I do think that there's a real opportunity to augment those capabilities, get coaching, get mentorship from a couple of those key functions.
Spot on. Yeah. Completely agree with you. It also depends on what your product is. If it's a SaaS-based product, it's going to be very different advice to if you are looking to sell hardware into, a certain part of the government. However, still, something that we found very, very useful when we were starting to create more product-based services within our sector. Again, this is SaaS, so it is more relevant to that. But were we going to hire a chief product officer? No. However, going out and speaking to experts in this particular area was an eye-opener, because there is a process. Well, there's multiple different processes, but they do work. And I think when it comes to product market fit, like you say, there's lots of different areas that you can look at. But if you're very early stage, going and identifying a chief product officer who has created products and successfully sold them and scaled them inside of your sector or arena, or interestingly, let's say that you are looking to do a SaaS-based product that is effectively selling hardware, or looking to optimize hardware systems, which we're obviously seeing a lot of, go and find somebody who's done it in a sector that you respect. And I think having that consultation with those sorts of people, they're going to give you a hard time. However, truly understanding how your product fits the market, is it the right price? Is it the right product? Is it the right place? That's absolutely imperative. So number one is just to go and either, if you're early stage, seed, pre-seed, maybe Series A, potentially even Series B, it's making sure that you are stress testing your product with people that have done this before and that do this for a living. Absolutely imperative. And then, we had to do it ourselves. You kind of have to set your ego aside and go and learn from these people. Now, should every company take advisory as gospel? No, because you have to have your own spin. But going out and getting this advice and then looking to bring it back in and put your own spin on it, absolutely imperative. So number one is the chief product officer for the product market fit. Really, really, really important. Number two is a bit more straightforward in terms of running out of cash. Of course, you really want to go and find a good CFO. Now, again, I think CFOs is probably the most developed part of this market in terms of fractional versus on-site. I think that's been going that way for a long time now. Lots of the companies that we know, they do have a fractional CFO until they get to a certain stage, typically Series C. That's then when they look to bring somebody in-house. But what they're doing is they're actually going and hiring from other sectors. So if you look at ISI as a prime example, they went and got theirs from Tesla. So, it's like, it's having the foresight to think, okay, what is it that we want to be and where are our gaps? But I think as an early stage, getting a fractional CFO as soon as possible makes complete sense. I think there is often a want from companies to bring in their friend who's done this, because they're like, well, that job is what it is. Looking after money is what it is. I would definitely encourage, whilst you want to look after your friends, it is important to go and get somebody with a lot of experience. And you can pick somebody up for somewhere between 3,000 to 10,000 a month, fully retained. That's not a lot in comparison to hiring somebody full-time. Now, I'm not trying to do CFOs out of a full-time job here, I promise. But what I'm saying is, that there is a time and a place, and these companies cannot run out of cash unless they absolutely have to. And that particular skill set is one that people should pay a lot of attention to.
Yeah, founding team should not have a CFO on it, period.
No.
I think there's an important, deeper truth in something that we're talking about, which is there is an evolution of the C-suite roles. Chief product officer, the key needs at different phases of the business will look different. And a single person may not be the right fit for all of those periods. This is absolutely true from a financial perspective.
Yeah.
Like at seed or at Series A, the CEO should have a deep understanding of the financial position of the business. And oftentimes what you're doing is just hiring a controller to manage the cash, help set the budget, understand where things are at. And the board is helping you sort of create some sort of accountability to what you say you're going to do and what you're actually going to do and what the numbers look like. You don't need the horsepower of a CFO, right? Like a CFO is going to help you say, how do we structure our chart of accounts? How do we think strategically about different sort of product lines and get some sort of basic accounting in place? How do we think basic about projections and getting a deeper understanding of our business model to project that into the future to allocate resources? So that is not a full-time need. You're getting to around Series B, Series C is often when it does become a critical need, and the inflection is you're repeatedly selling things, like you found a business model that works for you to commercialize, you're repeatedly selling things, you're projecting out with much more clarity, you have a much firmer understanding, and so like the value of your numbers actually tell you things about how to run your business, and you can be more strategic about how that drives your business. So bringing that in-house then makes a lot of sense because they can add a lot of strategic value. Similarly, you start to then think about your capital stack, whether you're raising equity or debt, and how you're preparing the company for, potential exit outcomes, right? Acquisition or IPO. And so a CFO should hopefully be able to bring networks, bring expertise, help you better you manage your capital stack. And so that's immensely valuable, going just beyond sort of the immediate operations and planning and budgeting. It's like how you actually finance your growth. So oftentimes you don't find those skill sets in a single person, and often you wouldn't find them at a seed or Series A type individual that would grow into these like deep networks to take your company public, right? A CFO pre-IPO is often a very specific hire because they have a very specific set of playbooks to help you get ready for that sort of main event.
Completely agree, 100%. And winding that all the way back from my personal experience was before we set up our company, I said to my mum, because she runs her own business, I said, I need to speak to your accountant and I need to speak to as many of them as I possibly can, because I have a model that I put together with one of the other founders, and I said, we need to stress test this. So we did. That was fine. That person was good. Then we started our business and we got heads down and we just went into it 100 miles an hour, and we burnt through 2 different accountants who turned out one of them to be a bit of a crook, actually. And I think, again, it's just having that mindset of like, this is a core area to focus on in your business right from the start. Now, whether you get the financial controller in or whether you go for an accountant, however you do it, had we have had that, but we'd also have had some outside support in terms of just stress testing this right from the beginning, then we wouldn't have had that person. And our FD now, he's somebody that had to come in and what's the polite way of saying it? He had to sort out a lot of the mess.
Yeah.
So I think again, no matter how early stage you are, just having the ability, if you're going to bring in these people that are going to be in control of any of these areas, consider having somebody external just to sense check that.
Yeah.
We didn't, and that was a big mistake. Turns out it was okay, but like that for lots of companies that could spell the end.
Yeah, and your needs are specific to a period in time, and you grow out of that. Oftentimes, the skills that you're looking for in a hire, may not grow with that. So the ability to tap into that, fractionally or through advisory or coaching is immensely valuable, because you're getting what you need at the right time, given the stage of the company. So
exactly that, yeah. And then, like you say, as you move up through the ranks, there does become a point of time where you do need a CFO. Mm-hmm. I've got it from Series C and beyond, from what we've seen. However, that person, again, I think it's really, really, really important to consider. If you're a space company, you don't necessarily need a CFO from the space industry. In actual fact, that's one of those roles where you should be considering your product market fit and thinking, okay, who are the customers that we want to win long term, and what's the business that we want to be in the future, and that should drive what the CFO is. And some of the best CFOs are going to come in from other sectors. We see that all the time. So, something that we've said right from the start is we want to be a company that drives talent in from other sectors. We saw an issue that existed 6 years ago, predominantly in the UK, less over here because of NASA, but where there was a bit of a branding issue. It didn't really align. It's like the sex appeal of the space industry. This is something that you guys nailed right out the gate. It's like there is a lot to sell here, and people should be excited by it, but people think that they could never get a job in it. Like, I'm sure you still have it yourself now. You speak to a family member, you say that you work in the space industry. Oh my God, how did you get into that? And you're like, well, it's actually kind of a normal industry once you're in it. It just has that sex appeal. So I think it's important for companies, first-time founders to just think, I don't need somebody from the space industry. We are going to run out of talent. That's why we've done what we've done with our branding, to drive in as much as we possibly can from other sectors. So I feel like a CFO is a really important one to consider there. Bring them in from somewhere else, please. Don't get somebody that's going to bounce around.
I mean, a critical part of SpaceX's early success is they hired key roles and experienced people from within, the aerospace industry. But they were very intentional at finding people that demonstrated excellence and capabilities in automotive and energy and mining and telecommunications that could bring an outside perspective into the core problems that they were solving. And it was critical to their early success and their sort of first principles approach at building the company. So I'm a big advocate of that, and I think that more companies should be open to recruiting outside of just pure aerospace like that.
100%.
That really limits your universe.
That's easier said than done. Sometimes people like to surround themselves with things that are a bit more comfortable. I guess this is just trying to put some stats and facts behind it to say it's okay to not do that. All right, cool. So in terms of weak leadership and team, tough one. Nobody likes to think that their own kid is ugly. It's very difficult to look at your own business and go, this isn't right. And I think this could be a whole host of different skill sets, couldn't it? Again, I think in terms of testing your leadership, I think a lot of it, if this is a VC-backed business, I would imagine this is where you guys come in as well. Having that second voice, having a look in objectively. But the main person that you want to bring in from this perspective is like a chief people officer. Now, it's very important to consider this particular person. Again, consider the company that you want to be like. But I know firsthand, lots of other startups do, there is definitely an issue that can arise if you bring somebody in from a huge organization into your startup. Especially if you're going to give them the responsibility for the people. You don't want to overstructure it, you don't want to lose your culture, you don't want to lose who you are, you don't want to lose your identity. However, you do need somebody that's kind of been there and made the mistakes before. So again, this is a tricky skill set to recruit for or to think about. Like, from your experience when it comes to kind of weak leadership and team issues that arise, what's your guys' typical kind of route of entry in to try to help those issues out?
There's so many here, but there's a subset of problems that, I don't think hires can help. So, it really is around co-founders. Like, the board is responsible and outside investors are responsible for, the CEO, right? And so having a properly structured board, that is objective and analyzing the performance of the CEO is important, and engaged in giving real feedback. Like, that is, an important capability to have in place, right? If it's just the other founders that are on the board, you don't have a difference of incentives or a difference of perspective. So those are things that, like, I don't think we should discuss, because those are sort of they exist in their sort of own realm. When it comes to, I think this goes to surrounding yourself with other really great people. Do you have the ability to have a high bar and consistently recruit or find people above that? And I think, again, SpaceX did this very well early on. And a large part of it is the executive team defining what that culture is, defining what that mission is, articulating the story, being able to say this is what we do clearly and consistently, and getting people to opt in or opt out of that in the recruiting process. Elon famously interviewed everybody at SpaceX until they had more than 1,000 employees at the company, right? It would go through a vetting process, but he still was aware and still doing checks, even certain technicians that were being hired. So there is a really important responsibility. Like if you're going to say we value this, you have to value it at the highest level, and you have to invest your time and willingness to put into that. Now, I think process can help structure that, but to me, it's a question of like being very clear about what you do, why you do it, and who is the right fit to work at your organization. And those things, part of that will change. Like who is the right fit will change over time. Like SpaceX has changed how they recruit for people. From the first 5,000 to now the next 10, 15,000 that they've changed. But there's still core principles to who they look for. And so you got to get that right early on. Yeah. And so, yeah, I'd be interested to see how a chief people officer fits into that, and do they report and sort of work with the CEO and sort of coach them, or how does that work?
Yeah, again, I think you and I both naturally kind of move towards like seed, pre-seed, Series A. A, because a lot of the companies are engaged with, and B, because that is the main reason why actually. So I think if we focus on that particular area, this is our swim lane. This is what we've been doing for the last 7 years. I think to bring somebody in full time is just not an option at all. But I think in terms of encapsulating what that role entails, and then making sure that you have that together, like you said, and you stick to it, and then you stress test it with others. So a really good example of this is culture has to come first. Even if someone's a big hitter, even if they're super talented, if they go against your culture, you have to take them out as quickly as possible. This is imperative, and companies can often make this mistake. It's something that we said we would do right from the start, and we did stick to it. So if somebody developed an ego that was bigger than the way that the company needed to go, unfortunately, we had to part company as soon as possible, even if they're our top performer. So I think that encapsulates what that job is. So culture first, 100%. The second part is kind of the interview process. So this is like the $1 million question. Interviewing, it's like I'm looking out the window now and I've got a good idea of what the weather's like, but until I actually go outside, I have no idea. It's like interviewing is exactly the same. Interviewing gives candidates a really good window into your company. Like you can pretty much work out roughly what the company's like just from a few interviews. Mm-hmm. And when you're in it and you're running it, you forget this. And there's an assumption that every candidate should want to work for your company because you are the coolest thing that's out there. It's whilst you might be having a slick interview process which sticks to culture, and just don't forget to sell your company. Like we work with so many companies who forget to sell, and the candidates are off the call. And yes, you need to manage expectations. Yes, it's going to be hard. Of course, that comes with the territory, but just don't forget to sell. And then you've got what you want is you want the option to hire the candidate at the end, and you want that to be in your power, not put the candidate off so much that come the end of the interview process, I'm not sure. You feel great, you feel like you put them off, but wouldn't you rather have the opportunity to make that decision yourself? So similar, I would imagine that's what Elon Musk was up to. Steve Finder, who now runs the executive search part of our business, worked for Elon Musk, and he did say the same sort of thing actually. Lots of control there over that particular part of it, but again, it's like that allowed them to create a bit of a cult. I'm not saying that companies should create a cult, but when we're talking here about team issues and things like this, you need to get everyone pointed in the same direction. You need to live and die by it, and you need to remove people that aren't on that journey, especially in the early stages. And don't be afraid of that. That's okay. That's normal. So I think it's about encapsulating the key elements of that role, which is what we've just discussed. And then, you can go external for that. You can get somebody to sense check. Keith Masbach is somebody for me that has always kept me in check when it comes to people stuff. Ex-army, then ran a non-for-profit, understands a lot about our sector, but ruthlessly puts people first. 100%. Like you have to put the people first. So I think having that sort of advisory and that on your shoulder all the time when it comes to people is really important. But I think in the early stages, you can't define that just to a chief people officer. Series C, Series D, yes. But before that, surround yourself with people that are keeping you in check on the culture that you want to build.
I think founders consistently undervalue this. So
yeah.
If you can bring that in through some sort of advisory, that as a check, as a reminder, as a support mechanism would be helpful.
Yeah, yeah. It must be hard, especially if your head's in hardware all day, and then you've got to come out and you're like, right, hold a minute. Now we need to go sell to these people. Difficult, but if you start the company, that's what you need to do.
Yeah.
Okay, let's do one more before we move on then. So the other one is scaling too quick. How often have you guys seen this?
Well, I think investors are a driver of this behavior, particularly in venture, because our funds exist to invest in companies that scale. So, VCs are willing to give you money to throw after, a market opportunity, particularly where there's a little bit of traction, and they want you to go pursue it, right? And so for us, we have the ability to take that risk because one position in our portfolio of 20 or 30 or 50 companies is what's going to drive our return. And so if you have that early indication of scale, we're going to tell you to go hard at it. And we're going to push you to do that. I mean, that's the nature of venture. So I would say, one, founders should be aware of what the expectations are from the capital that they're raising, because that's inherent to our business model, right? And if that's not what you want to do, no problem. Just don't take that capital, because it could be the source of your demise.
Yeah.
I would say, and sort of on the flip side, a lot of founders that have been able, I have seen founders achieve success frequently, not more frequently or less, but by surviving, right? And so giving yourself enough runway to find and iterate when you have that great team, when you surround yourself with great people, a recipe for success doesn't have to be just scale at any cost. It can be survive, at any cost and be the last person standing, or put all the pieces together, or be the one that sort of defines your category when all the dust settles.
Yeah.
So we're sort of coming out of that period. I would say 2015 to 2021 was like growth at any cost, and now it's been survival at any cost, and we're sort of seeing what the winners will look like there.
Yeah. So for you guys, this must be quite a difficult question, because it's just by its very nature, you guys want to reach scale. Who are the skill sets? I have my own ideas, but who are the skill sets internally that, or the job roles that you feel kind of keep you guys on track? It's like, look, that's great, but we can't scale that right now because of X, Y, Z. Is there a particular counterpart that you guys often look to?
Yeah, so I mean, we have, as a venture firm, the management of money and accounting and everything sort of grounds what we do. We have to be very principled in what we're looking at and how we spend, and it's just like any other business. Yeah. So a good grasp of, like, we have a very known business model. That's not uncertain, that's not unclear. We have a lot of uncertainty around like when and where investment returns will come from. So, we have to be very thoughtful at like how we grow, when we grow, and in anticipation of investment returns materializing, right?
Yeah.
And so it is a deep understanding and a good accounting of the business model, and the ability to track inflows and outflows and understand our investment positions and forecast it. And so I would say that it's similar at a company level. I would say that thoughtful scaling resides at sort of the COO and sort of finance office, and having a strategic mindset within both of those roles, that take the numbers and see where the market's at, and can sort of read the tea leaves, so to speak, and you have to be willing to take bets to win, and you're not going to have full clarity on like when it is appropriate to scale, but you have to be judicious enough that if that doesn't work out, it doesn't cost the company,
Yeah.
So that's a tricky balance. That's that sort of operations and I think financial tension that's very healthy in a company.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. The operations side of it is huge. The actual running of the business. Remember, before we set up, everyone was like, "Look, I'm too enthusiastic, and I'm going to need a miserable person." Who I have that in one of the other founders, Jack. I'm not saying he's a miserable person; he's really not. But he's the what could go wrong guy. Whenever we're coming up with an idea, he's thinking about in what way could that cause issues, whereas I'm always thinking about in what way could this work. So we naturally have that at a founder level. However, it wasn't until we hired Wendy, who is the extreme of that, who is the person who is the brain behind the business. She is the operations. So I think bringing in an operations person, if you don't have one, fairly early on, is a very, very, very good idea. Now, this is one that I would argue people should think about right from the start. Have a look at the founders. Is one of you the miserable one in terms of what might go wrong, or is everybody just buzzing all the time about what could go right? And if not, then you probably want to think about bringing somebody in just to challenge that. And the great thing about VP of Ops or operations managers all the way up to COOs is that you can trust them. Their job is to make your vision a reality. So I think having somebody internally for that right from the get-go makes sense. So yeah. Just moving on to another one actually, because chief marketing officers. Now, marketing is an interesting subject at the moment. I think every company needs a great marketer, especially in today's age. We noticed that right from the start. That's why we set up the brand that we did against the company that we came from, because we worked out that marketing is sales and sales is marketing. Those two are absolutely intrinsic. That's now normal now, but 7 years ago that wasn't necessarily the case. So bringing in a good marketing person is key. At what point do you think that should be a full-time hire for the businesses that you guys have invested into? Is that right from the start, or would you go fractional and then look to bring somebody in, or would you bring in somebody a bit less experienced and then you supplement that? Like, what would be your advice on that?
I think it depends on how brand conscious the founders are. And some founders are incredible at storytelling and see the value of investing in a brand and will direct a meaningful amount of their time to do that. And it's critical for success throughout the life cycle. So if you have that innate ability, I don't think you need to go out and buy that full time. It's helpful to have coaches in that area regardless. You are constantly selling in some different way, right? Whether it be to your suppliers, whether it be to your investors, whether it be to new recruits that you're looking at, or your customers. So marketing touches all of those stakeholders, and it equips you with the visual identity, the stories, the narratives to be able to do that effectively. So if you have that, awesome on the team. If you don't, it is so important. It is probably one of the single biggest areas that we overlooked early in our investing approach.
Okay.
We rotated very heavily into people's past performance of technical excellence and sort of business track record, and sort of underweighted the value of brand and storytelling when we looked at founders. And so I think if you don't have any of that, I think you should try to bring somebody on, and maybe full time, and potentially even have a coach to help in certain areas of that workflow.
Yeah.
If you do have that within the team, I think it probably makes more sense when you then start, probably post Series A, to start to think then more intentionally about different aspects of the market, what channels, how you're messaging, how you're reaching, how you're onboarding them, in a thoughtful way. And that sort of chief marketing officer type role in conjunction sort of with sales, it starts to become much more valuable at that point.
Yeah.
So I would say the harder question to me is when do you bring in a chief sales officer or a chief marketing officer? Those two.
Which one's first? Yeah. The sales side of it we haven't touched on, but that's obviously huge. Lots of companies now starting to pop up, helping to navigate the government. We obviously heard at the event yesterday, Space Force are very keen to make it easier to work with Space Force. Fingers crossed that happens. That'd be amazing for everybody. Inevitably, it's not going to be as straightforward as just an overnight thing. So that I guess that philosophy of going to an expert who knows how to read the customer is super, super, super important. So, that I would imagine, you should never assume, but that should be something that people are thinking about right from the start. Who's our customer? How do we get in there? How do we speak their language? Am I able to do it? If not, then somebody else should. I feel like marketing is everything that comes after that. It's like the marketing is okay. Here's our customer. Here's where we want to go. I believe it was Hermes who, and I heard this on the grapevine, so this might not be a fact, but it's interesting. They developed their logo for their hypersonic plane to mirror that of a specific part of the government that they wanted to win, and it was actually the person responsible for signing off on the budget. It was their particular faction of the Air Force that had the similar logo. So that's what I'm talking about. They kind of worked out who their customer is, but their marketing and branding wise, they built off the back of that. So I think the sales strategy should come first, and the marketing is there then to support that, and that's what should drive it. So, but again, it comes back to product market fit, doesn't it? That's got to be number one, and within that is sales. It's the whole process, isn't it? It's like you want to be able to walk away, and in a perfect world, it sells itself. Obviously, then the whole part of the business then is to keep everything else on track. So I go marketing after sales personally.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. I guess it depends on how differentiated the technology is, how competitive your market is, how much you're going to have to invest in educating the customers to be able to drive awareness, and how many touch points you need to have to result in a conversion of sales. So, you can get very, I think, methodical with this. I think a lot of people push out marketing quite late in their career. It seems like something that's nice to have, and I would argue that there, a lot of tech and a lot of service are more commoditized these days, and so you really have to differentiate your position. So I'd say that there's a higher value to investing in brand and marketing early on. So.
Yeah, that's definitely a valid point. Yeah, how well you tell your story. Listening to Lunar Outpost yesterday, on the stage, I was like, I want to work at that company. Those guys clearly know how to articulate what they're doing to a high standard, 100%. Same with Interloon. Rob Mason, he's obviously been in the industry for a long time. Somebody that knows how to articulate it. I think a lot of this content is going to be useful for those first-time founders. Those people that are thinking about starting their own company. We've both learned a lot over the last 7 years, and I think being able to pass that knowledge on, and just there is no set way of doing this. I think that's really the important point. There is not a ABC of how to set up a company and be successful, but there are a lot of lessons that people can learn from. So kind of interesting segue into the final part. So mentors. So have you got a mentor?
I would say mentorship is something that's not formal in that regard. Would you be my mentor? It's more of, I respect this person, and I want to, I reach out to them and say, hey, you have time for a chat? I like how you're doing this thing, right? And so early in my career, mentorship was more formal and sort of structured, but it's something that I am still intentional about, and it's just you think that you respect and you think that are sort of really doing a good job in an area, and having conversations with them. The term mentorship can be very formal, so I think that particularly when you're more senior in your career, I think it's really important to be open and willing to learn from people. It doesn't necessarily always mean people that are more senior. I spend office hours every week talking to really anybody who's willing to block time on my calendar, and many of them are young folks, and the reason that I do it is because I learned so much from them. It's what are you seeing in the market? What are you learning in school? What are your interests and priorities? And how is this company resonating with you or not resonating with you? It's So I think it goes both ways. Like you can learn from people younger and older than you, and you just have to be intentional about it. That's how mentorship sort of works for me.
Yeah. Understood. Yeah, I think that you're very inquisitive, which naturally means that you will automatically find mentorship, and then you like to mentor people as well. I think as we both know, sometimes some of the hardcore founders, super intelligent, have come up with an incredible piece of hardware. To go out and actively seek mentorship might be something that isn't like a natural process.
Yeah.
Part of our jobs is that we have to constantly learn. We're not sat developing hardware day in, day out. So I think it's a different thing, isn't it? But some of the statistics again that are out there in terms of this, how successful businesses are with mentors, are pretty crazy. So leaders in business who have a mentor or have the same way of operating themselves the same as you do, 130% more likely to advance into C-suite positions. So significantly more likely. 75% of executives attribute their success to having a mentor, which I think is very, very interesting. And companies with mentors outperform other companies by an order of 83%. So this whole thing of having a sounding board, is probably a better way to say it, rather than a formal mentor, is super, super, super important. And I think I know lots of businesses where I speak to them, and I've been there myself before, where you just don't do it, and you kind of get on this path sometimes, super enthusiastic, you're buzzing about it. You talk to other people, they think it's a bad idea, and then you find yourself in kind of a lonely position. So I think just that constant requirement to have a mentor or to soundboard on others is really important. And one amazing thing about the space industry is that it is very welcoming, isn't it? Compared to lots of other sectors, and people are willing to mentor you. So I would just say, if there's a way to open up this sector, just for people to feel comfortable to reach out to others, say, look, I love what you're doing. Could you just help me? I think what people will find in this sector versus others is that that's not an issue at all.
Yeah,
people genuinely want to help.
Definitely a willingness to that.
Yeah.
I've probably done 50 spotlight interviews for a platform I help run, Space Talent, and this is CEOs, this is engineering leaders, this is technical software folks, all different aspects, all different stages of their career. The common through line amongst all of these folks has been, at some point, a mentor or an advisor helped sort of shift their educational career trajectory in a meaningful way, right? All of them had that. All of them have that. And I think it can be harder when you get more sort of developed and mature in your career to intentionally seek that out. But I think that's changed in sort of the modern sense that you now see the highest performing athletes and CEOs seeking out coaches. I mean, that's just another form of mentorship, somebody who's intentionally focused on seeing you get the best out of your performance, giving you honest feedback. Mentorship's informal, coaching is more formal, but I think that's a really positive trend. I would encourage everybody to try to seek that out in their career.
100%. Yeah. So I think in terms of like a checklist, just in terms of the stuff that we've learned so far, then I think having a mentor or advisors right from the get-go and throughout is important. Those will change as you grow as a person, as your company grows, and that's okay. And your mentors and advisors need to be okay with that. And then really it's just having these particular skill sets that we know can help companies stop failing. Just have those mapped out right from the start. It's like, okay, who are we going to go to for advice on this? Who are we going to go to for advice on that? Now, whether this needs to be there on like pitch decks, probably not. I think it's just something that people need to go to bed thinking about and wake up thinking about. It's like, have I got this blind spot covered in my business? And that does not need to be a full-time position. However, once you get to a certain funding round, thinking about bringing in this structure around you is very important. So I think there's a lot of space for both full-time staff, and the routes to market to find those people are significantly different to finding fractional people. Fractional is a bit more transactional, and I think it's based upon looking at somebody's previous experience and accolades and working out where you want to go at that point in time. Whereas when you want to bring somebody into this rigorous interview process, these are going to be people that are responsible for your failure or not. So I think having that blended approach and knowing when to bring them in and how important these hires are in terms of your success or not, and how you interview against them versus if you don't have it, quickly being able just to access this sort of talent is if we can change the failure rate by 1%, then great. With some of this access. So I think that was what I was very keen to unpack today, which I feel like we've done. I just hope that it's able to help some other founders out there, some other businesses who are probably feeling the pressure. It is hardcore to have your own company. I live and breathe that every single day. So having learnt this, if there's a first-time founder who can take this and put it together and make their life a bit easier, then great.
Seek out mentors and advisors, and don't be afraid to pay for it when it's mission critical for what you're doing.
Exactly that. Yeah. And just make sure that you cover all of your bases in these core areas, whether it's internal or external. But you have to have somebody on it who's going to challenge you. Absolutely imperative.
Love it.
Cool. All done.
PK, can you hear us?
Hopefully she's not asleep.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ, that was boring.
She's got it.